at episode 23, and we're very proud of that. Now, before I tell you what's in store for us today, on this show, I should say, where innovation meets inspiration. So I want us to remember that we define creativity here at Creative Voices in terms of problem-solving thinking, in terms of those individuals within our Caribbean and diaspora landscape that are really doing innovative things that are pushing us to where we need to go. And that, I think, is very much in keeping with our theme for today. But before we get there, I just want to stop a moment and extend special greetings to the man who has really assisted us from the very beginning, who has produced this show, who has made it possible for us to go from our thoughts and our concepts out into the ether where you can hear us, you can engage with us, the conversation, the dialogue can keep going. So a very special happy birthday to DJ Flames, our man behind the scenes.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure, and it's a pleasure working with you as well.
Wonderful. And just to remind you all that he has also been a guest on the show. So if you want to check that episode, it was really a very interesting one. So you can always go back on our YouTube channel and listen to that episode and learn more about his life and his journey as a DJ. So today we are talking about all things Big Push as it relates to the ECCB's recently launched strategic plan and the Growth and Resilience Dialogue in its 10th year. So we have two very special guests on with us today. So we have the Senior Project Specialist at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Ms. Sybil Welsh. I think that Sybil is still in the process of joining us, so we will have her voice on cue soon when we return from the break. We also have joining us from Antigua, Principal and Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies Five Islands Campus, Professor Justin Robinson. Good morning, Prof. Robinson. I hope you're hearing us.
Yeah, hi, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Hi.
Oh, welcome, Sybil. How are you?
Hi, yes, I'm good.
Okay, excellent. So this show, as we all know, is made possible by some fantastic and fabulous sponsors, which we have had on long before Creative Voices even became part of the Voices family. So we have on board once again in the first hour sponsoring us Flow. It's a Flow-tastic Friday. Every Friday is a Flow-tastic Friday. So you can check out what special offers Flow has in store, check any of their retail outlets, check them out online and see what's happening there. We also extend our gratitude once again and always to Rams, the good food people. Rams is everywhere. You must have one close by. It's Friday, go out, find something in Rams, enjoy yourself. If it is something like a fruit salad, if it is something like a nice little beverage, it's all up to you. Rams has it. Check them out. Rams, the good food people, are our sponsors for Hour One as well. We also have TDC. Together We Achieve. You can check TDC for almost all your needs. So if you're going from insurance to buying a vehicle, to buying a mop, to buying anything that you can think about almost, you can find it in TDC. Together We Achieve. They'll work together to make sure that we in St. Kitts and Nevis can have access to what we need to have access to in order to live our lives well as we wish. So we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, don't go too far. We'll be talking about the ECCB's Big Push strategy. We'll be talking about the Growth and Resilience Dialogue. We have some exceptional guests on the show, as always, today. And as always, at Creative Voices, where innovation meets inspiration, we are looking for how we can collectively, within this region, within this sub-region, push our countries forward. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
It's in the feeling in our we talk. It's in the meaning in our spot. It is the thing that sets us apart. Who we are. Cause the rhythm of life keeps bumping. Together going strong. No matter what, we keep things flowing. Before we will go all in. Our hands up in the sky. Celebrating. Come let your rhythm flow.
Get ready, St. season is coming your way. Join TDC Home and Building Depot on Saturday, May the 30th for the spectacular outdoor tent sale. Save big with up to 75% off selected items. Furniture, appliances, home goods, hardware, electronics, lawn and garden supplies, and so much more. Whether you're upgrading your home, tackling a project, or shopping for unbeatable bargains, this is the sale you don't want to miss. One day only, Saturday, May the 30th. TDC Home and Building Depot sent Kits and Nevis. Come early for the best deals because once they're gone, they're gone. TDC Home and Building Depot, serving St. Kitts and Nevis.
This summer, the Caribbean's premier music experience returns. Welcome to the 28th edition of the St. Kitts Music Festival, featuring the incredible Kilani, Fantasia, Beres Hammond, Luciano, Soca King Marshall Montano, Soca Sensation Voice, and Vaughn. Dancehall giant Movado, Idonia, and the new wave, Valiant. Also featuring Massacre, Cranium, Taurus Riley, Steel Pulse, Dean Fraser and the Black Soil Band, Shanil Mir, Diani, Rodney Tatat, and Zoo. The legendary New Vibes Band International, Brandon and ASAP Band, Shelly and Signal Band, plus Edwin Yearwood and Crossfire, Lucas HE, and Garlic and the Upper Level Band. June 25th to June 27th, Warner Park Cricket Stadium, St. Kitts. Get your tickets now at stkittsmusicfestival.com. The St. Kitts Music Festival, where music meets paradise.
Welcome back. You are tuned in to Creative Voices. It's a Creative Voices Friday, and as usual, we are very happy to have you joining us. We are on episode 23. So those of you who have been with us from the beginning, thank you. Those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'm Sarah Owen, your host. And today we have with us two very special guests, as I'd mentioned before the break, Mrs. Sybil Welsh, who is a senior project specialist at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We also have joining us from Antigua, just a hop away, Professor Justin Robinson, who is the professor and pro-vice chancellor of the UWI Five Islands campus. So this episode really came about, I would say that it was birthed through the recent experience that all three of us had, though through completely different lenses, of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's annual Growth and Resilience Dialogue, this year in its 10th year. So special congratulations to you, Sybil, on another exceptional opportunity for collective dialogue around those things that are so important to us within the currency union. Within that opening, or the opening of that particular dialogue, I recall the governor of the ECCB saying that we have to act now because development delayed is development denied. He also said that we are looking at, or we are focusing on a shift from vulnerability to value, and that we have to scale through collective action. And opportunities like this for discussion is how we can really look at embracing that call to collective action, because so many of us can become involved in this and move it, to borrow from Julie Martin's recent children's dance theater recital, move it from the page to the stage. Take this strategy that all of these economists and all of these scholars have worked so hard on and actually implement what we can. And Professor Robinson, you have written quite a lot on this. I'm always in awe of how, I felt really, I couldn't imagine how quickly you wrote a 5-part op-ed after the GRD 10, when I was still probably doing groceries or doing something that felt very mundane by comparison. Another thing that the governor said, using that quoted refrain, curse the darkness or light a candle. And that made me think, and that's why I like how this first of what I hope may be a few ECCB-centered, Big Push-centered episodes of Creative Voices, that created this symbolism, this metaphor of fire and light, and that is something that I think coincides very nicely, Prof. Robinson, with the UWI theme, which our motto, which is Orient's ex Occidente Lux, a light rising in the West. So how do we collectively rise now in the West, and how do we push our currency union forward? Now, as you all know, those of you who are veterans of the program, and those of you who are new, you will soon find out that this program is as much about the storytellers as it is about the story. So we always begin with finding a little something out about the people who have arrived at the journey. I'm quite intrigued to hear more about it, because I know that it must be multifaceted, because I know you, and I know you to be a very dynamic woman. So Sybil, good morning.
Hi, Sarah. Good morning, and good morning, Justin. Justin and I were in UWI together, so all of us, 3 of us, we are UWI, the products of the University of the West Indies. So kudos. How do I describe myself? I think I am passionate about development and life. I'm a creative thinker, innovative thinker, I would say. And my genesis really started throughout school. Throughout school, I had professors and teachers who were quite dramatic. I could remember June Frederick, or Grace Richardson. I could remember our Governor General. And there's so many persons who, when they came into the class, they brought the spirit of the subject. They brought it to life. And so for me, that whole idea of how can I be part of the pool of ecosystem developers deeply committed to development of the region. I started my first job per se as a high school teacher. I taught for a year before I went off to UWI. And I said that was the best grounding. Dealing with young people who you are barely older than, and realizing you can't go into a class with chalk and talk. You have to go in with spirit and energy and innovation. And so everything I do as a trainer, which I have as a freelance ecosystem developer where I train, but that is part of my the underpinnings of how I see life. I'm also a dancer. And so when I think, I love to read. And so outside of my job at the central bank, where I am now currently a senior project specialist and in charge of leading the growth and resilience dialogue since 2021. So there were Danny Atherton and others before me, Imran Williams before me, who dealt with 1 to 4. And I took it off. It started in 2017. So I took it over in 2021. So I've been there with 6 years. And the idea really is, how do we move from dialogue to action? So every time we do a growth and resilience dialogue is, what are the programs, actionable programs that come out of there? I am very passionate about financial and economic education. And so I previously was the author of Financial Information Month and of our savings and investment courses and our small business workshop, which incidentally, I created the first prototype in 2016 when I was in charge of launching the self-employed coverage. At that time, Social Security felt that with a new board, these ideas was a little too out there for Social Security to become an educator. But I saw it as a way of addressing several problems. We had self-employed persons who were employers who weren't making their contributions. We realized they had certain deficiencies in knowledge about finance and managing business. And so when I got to the ECCB, developing the Eastern Caribbean Stock Exchange as part of the team, I just pulled that and said, listen, here is a way that we can build capacity on the ground for investors. And I was with that until 2016. As I said, outside of that, I was actually a part-time lecturer for the Center for Management Development. That is now, I think, the Sagicor School of Business on organizational theory and business. And outside of all those work, I see myself as really a student of life. I am blessed, my husband and I, to have 2 girls. And so we are, I always say I am just nurturing what God has put there for me as the nurturer, but they're not mine. They belong to the universe. And so those are some of the things that really embody how I see life, how I can give back, how I can make a difference.
All right, I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you, Sybil, because this approach to lifelong learning and this spirit of generosity is exactly what I have experienced in knowing you over those years. Coincidentally, June Frederick and Grace Richardson at the time, Laplace, by the time she taught me, but they were also my teachers, and definitely I agree that they are teachers I remember well for the influence that they had over my own development. At which school did you teach? You didn't say. Normally, people say
From junior high.
At Baxter Junior High?
And I taught junior high, and I can see so many of my students who are in business, who are in places throughout the economy. And it's such a blessing to see that even though I was with them just for a year, that they still remember some aspects. And I love teaching. I mean, I teach dance for the Wesley Methodist Dance Group.
Okay.
And I find that such engaging with young people is always an energy boost. You have to be on your P's and Q's, you have to bring it because they bring it, right? And so I love that. And so I have never left the classroom, actually. I was just the other day doing a teaching with the Ministry of Social Development. And so I do sessions on managing your money and all of those things on an annual basis, and also for the teacher. So did I tell you, did I forget? I'm also part of the team, the Aspire team.
You did forget, yes.
How could I forget that? Leading the transformation of making sure young people leave school armed with real life skill sets to manage. It doesn't make any sense to say you're teaching them for life, and when they get out, they have nowhere to manage their money. So we have a pilot right now at Washi, Bosnia High, and we're hoping to bring that across the country, the schools in St. Kitts and Nevis. But it's really a joy going into the classrooms and see those young people really enjoying the sessions, and not only enjoying it, but able to articulate it back through games, through presentations, through pop quizzes. They're really energized. And so they give us hope that we have a long way to go, but we are getting somewhere, one step at a time.
Yeah, and that's, as the Jamaicans say, one cocoa filled basket, right?
Yes.
So, and I always like the concept of day by day, and of late I've taken it all the way down to moment by moment, so each moment has value, and there are a lot of moments that you have shared with us along your journey that have clearly added value to the people with whom you engage. So we're going to take a little pause now. We're going to hear from our sponsors who continue to make this show possible. Prof. Robinson, when we come back, we're going straight to you. So I hope you're ready, because we want to hear from you as well about the journey that led you from where you started to where you are now. And then we'll take it from there as we look at how we go forward collectively. So stay tuned. This is Creative Voices. I'm your host, Sarah, and we'll be back after the break.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
Kitts and Nevis. The biggest outdoor savings event of the season is coming your way. Join TDC Home and Building Depot on Saturday, May the 30th for the spectacular outdoor tent sale. Save big with up to 75% off selected items. Furniture, appliances, home goods, hardware, electronics, lawn and garden supplies, and so much more. Whether you're upgrading your home, tackling a project, or shopping for unbeatable bargains, this is the sale you don't want to miss. One day only, Saturday, May the 30th, TDC Home and Building Depot sent Kitts and Nevis. Come early for the best deals because once they're gone, they're gone. TDC Home and Building Depot, serving St. Kitts and Nevis.
Come, build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers. We don't just sell materials, we help you build your dreams. Whether it's a new home, a renovation, or a DIY project, we're here to make it happen. That's why we say, build with us. From foundation to finish, come to our stores where we have the best in building materials, hardware, tools, paints, expert advice, and more. Whatever you need, you can count on us. So if you're ready to get started, build with us. With Hostels Building and Nevis Centers, you're not just building a structure, you're building a future. Let us help you create something amazing. Dream with us, plan with us, grow with us, build with us. Come build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers today. Build with us at Hostels.
Welcome back. You are tuned in to Creative Voices, episode 23, and we are joined today by Sybil Welsh, who has just told us her very dynamic, as those who know Sybil know that's what the story was going to be like. You know, it was going to be a dynamic story. So we have heard the dynamic story from Sybil of her journey through education, her love of lifelong learning, and how she implements and executes that in her everyday life. And I'm sure that there are many who will be inspired by what you've shared with us so far, Sybil. Professor Robinson, how are you today?
Good morning. I'm a bit intimidated now that you have me coming after Sybil, but it's okay.
All right, I'll take that with a pinch of salt. We're hearing you very well, but if you can just lower your camera just a little bit. Oh, there we go. Now we can see you a little bit better. Or your camera goes up. Now, yeah, perfect. So for those of us who are on the live stream, they get both the audio and the video. And they'll also see that our numbers are at the bottom of the screen. So it is a live call-in program. So our lines are open if anybody wishes to call in. Very often people just wish to listen to the dialogue as it unfolds. So the numbers for those who are listening via the radio, the numbers in St. Kitts and Nevis are 466-0908 and 662-0989, and in the UK 033-344-0065, in the US and Canada 305-921-4619 and 718-285-6984. A couple of those are also on the bottom of the screen if you're watching. So, Prof. Robinson, Tell us a little bit about the journey. I mean, you know, you've had a few viral articles of late. People are familiar with your voice in our landscape, in our ecosystem. But how did little boy Justin in St. Vincent and the Grenadines get to be Professor and Pro Vice Chancellor Robinson of the University of the West Indies?
Okay, so thanks. So good morning to your audience. So again, it started for me in tiny village in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Kittell's village, tiny fishing village. If you jump off my mom's patio, you are right onto the sea sand.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm used to, as a little boy, you would collect a tax, because the fishermen have to, when they get their catch, they have to pass through our yard to get to the road to sell. So they have to leave a little something as the tax are passing through. So yes, I went to primary school, Petersville. Fantastic place there. So I remember the first, and I always throw this back at my parents, because, you know, the old headmistress there, you know, she thought she thought I was such a fantastic student. But what she didn't know is that my grandmother was a stay-at-home grandmother. So I was taught to read from very young. So when I went in, she thought I was so bright, but she didn't know that I had been trained to read. And she sort of adopted me and said, I can't charge you or anything for this boy to be at my school.
Wow.
So I went through there. Really enjoyed that. Very formative experience. Then to St. Martin's Boys Secondary School, which is a Catholic secondary school. Again, really very fantastic. Those, you know, in those days, our school, the majority of the teachers were actually monks. You know, we used to call them brothers. They did this full time. They were very progressive. So I think I was exposed to a lot of progressive ideas there. And then on to the St. Vincent Grammar School for my A-levels, which is where I think my life took a little bit of a turn. You know, I was always much more of a art student. You know, my best subjects in school were literature and history. But then, you know, sort of thinking A-levels, well, what am I going to do to get a job? So that took me down a more of a business route, you know, where I did economics and stuff like that. Then went to UWE on a government scholarship where I met Civil. She was a live wire there.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yes, you know, yeah, unbelievable.
What happens at UWE stays at UWE.
yes. And it's always very interesting, you know, how your life turns out. I mean, when I went to KFL a long time ago, I never, I mean, I need to put things in context. Back in those days from St. Vincent, you know, for the entire country, there was like one island scholarship to go to UWE.
Wow.
Right? It was just one. Now there are a lot. So I was just so relieved and happy to be able to get to university. It never really crossed my mind that I would spend almost the rest of my life there. Yeah, so I did my 3-year degree there, and they hired me as a teaching assistant on graduation, which really then started an association. Because in a sense, KFL campus was sort of my home. I left to go to Florida International to do a master's, came back to KFL, taught, then went to Manchester in England to do a PhD, came back to KFL, and I've sort of been there all this time before I was summoned and told, well, you know, you're an OECS boy, you gotta go down to Antigua and do this job with this brand new campus. Like, really? You know, you're asking me to leave established Cave Hill family, etc., and go down to this fledgling campus? I guess like Sybil, I had to leave. I've sort of left my wife and 2 daughters still based in Barbados, I guess. So those are my blessings. So in a way, that's my story. I'm there, and I've always been, I've been writing articles for a long time. So that's something I've always seen myself as a bit of a public scholar, you know, always engaging on programs and writing. The new U.S. administration and their policies sort of maybe pushed me in a different direction, as I felt a lot of people in our region, particularly younger people who hadn't grown up in the old Cold War, didn't really understand or didn't have the tools to understand this new environment. and how big a change in the environment we are facing, which really culminated in sort of my view of the current moment, that the world has changed. No one is coming to save us. We have to do it ourselves. So that's what's driving me at this moment, and really in some ways the involvement in the big push that, the world has changed. We are at a crisis moment. And if we don't grab this moment, then I think the good quality of life I think we enjoy in the EC could really be seriously undermined.
Yeah, and I think that it's, that I don't know how and when that particular phrase entered your mind, but it was a brilliant moment that sparked some very needed dialogue and discussion. This concept that no one is coming to save us from one of our region's lead economists makes you pause. And it's not something that we haven't known or heard. And I have had the benefit of attending, several of the GRDs, probably all of them. And this is kind of, this need to save ourselves then is clearly what the independence agenda should really be about, right? So it is, but it seems to have, people seem to be coalescing around it in what I've read of commentaries, in what I've seen of the way that it's been referred to. And I think a similar moment was sort of happening after the last GRD with the big push strategy. Now, both of you have indicated your early leanings to creative arts, performing arts, literary arts, that type of thing. And I think that sometimes, I think the U2 musician Bono said once that there are some moments in life that require a moment of poetry. So sometimes there's a moment of poetry that is needed for humanity, for people, for a population to move, to start to work cohesively, collectively. And I think that the framing that no one is coming to save us and we have to save ourselves, as well as the ECCB's thematic big push as something that we can remember, something that we can think about. What I saw coming out of the GRD this year was it's what appeared to me to be a lot more engagement on platforms like LinkedIn and so on. A lot of people who were sharing their different perspectives on what occurred, on, maybe where their frustrations are, but engaging in the dialogue, seeing how we each have a voice that is part of this very important collective action. So for both of you, you had very different roles. I mean, I was an attendee. I shouldn't say just an attendee. It's a very important role. I was an attendee and I paid keen attention and I learned a lot, as I always do. You each had some coordination, some presenter roles as well, some input that you made. Can you share with us, one, what this dialogue means to you and why it's important, and two, what your sort of takeaways were when you left the last edition of GRD, and if you thought that there was anything different in the energy that surrounded it when you emerged from it? So either of you can take it first. Sybil, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, thanks, Sarah. For me, as the coordinator and designer in collaboration with the team of the GRD, the energy that we wanted to have, the interest we wanted to spark, the action-oriented outputs, or at least leading to outputs, pathways. It was quite, we have so many takeaways. I mean, you mentioned Governor Antoine in his Act Now, development, delayed is development, denied. He spoke about the issue of our growth. When you look at our GDP, and that really measures really our output, our productivity, that we are really in maintenance mode, averaging around 3% for this year, and nothing much different in the sort of what we're going to see for next year. And if you think about what goes into that, it means what are the components of our economic sectors that are underperforming, and how can we then look at that and create the output that we want. Because if we look at what we are, if we hear the takeaways that's saying some of the things require policy, not capital, but policy. So how do we ingrain policy with the big push? Because at the end of the day, your strategy guides your policy guides your activities determine your productive output. So how are we creating that? And the whole issue of ecosystem approach, of system thinking, was underscored by Dr. Jules. And then you had David Mullins, who spoke about the issue of, do not look at our diaspora as something to just say, gimme, gimme, gimme. Looking at it as there's some charity benefactor. But we must look at them in and Ambassador Henry underscored that as well, in that we must look at that as, how do we engage the further aspects of us, and the further aspects of us, not the other, but the additions of us, lie in the diaspora. And so how do we look at that with different lens of engagement, of understanding they're part of the whole, that if we're not connected to them, we're losing a part of ourselves. And that engagement can spur knowledge transfer on both sides. It can spur investment capital on both sides. So it's, we invest there, they invest here. But it also, we are stronger together. And so that is our strength. So when we're looking at our identity and we're looking at our region, we have to define it more broadly. I think Leaf, when he was speaking about the customs and logistics and connectivity, him and Darwin Telemac, they both underscored the need for, it's not, we're in a hardware era, but really it's software we should be looking at. Software connectivity, a single window. How do we make sure I think Governor Antoine and our partners at the World Bank, they said the same thing, in that our geography suggests we should be more connected, yet we are the most disconnected with each other and more connected to North America and other places. Why is that? So geography itself should suggest that we should be collaborating more. The issue of Ross Cadastre, when he spoke about the issue of developing our informal sector, our small business sector, our medium-sized businesses. I mean, all of our businesses are relatively small if you compare them to elsewhere. But within our own space, how are we creating? And he spoke about systems, because when we speak about development, we tend to think it's siloed. I'm going to put this in place. So if I'm talking about MSME development, I'm going to put training in place. But then training is not enough. Where is access to finance? Where is that quasi sort of board that if I don't have the wherewithal to have an advisory board, I have some free access to intellectual capital to guide me? Where is the nurturing? And so the reason why we keep having all of these initiatives but not getting the value impact is because we're taking a siloed approach to development and not seeing it as an ecosystem. What are all the touch points? I mean, if I want to develop an athlete, I have to look at their eating, their sleeping, their what is going into their training. I look at the whole. And when we're looking at an athlete, and we even think about the Jamaican model, they take you from primary school, they nurture you. Where is that pipeline, that value added for our scientists, our agriculturists, our dancers, our musicians, our poets, so we are not creating that development model, that architecture. So we think that you go through school and then by the time you get to you figure it out and then you come back, but it doesn't work that way. And we're not building in an identity of the region. So if we're not standing by things, we fall for everything. Who we are, how we speak, how we think, how we love, how we engage, how we encompass our identity. So more and more, we see fragmentation, that we think our identity is just in whether we dance or whatever. But no, our identity is how we make decisions. It's how we engage each other. It's how we pursue development. It's how we vision ourselves in the world. That itself, you can't find anywhere that says this is who we are in its complexity. You know, when we say who we are, we think carnival, but no, it's everything, who we are. And if we understand that has to be a collective, then who we are becomes that sort of defining. And then it determines how we engage the rest of the world.
Right. You know, it's interesting because this came up at the GRD as well for me in discussion with someone, I believe, because this idea of the Caribbean identity, I recall some time ago, back in my UE days, my working for UE days, I have so many UE days, student days, you know, 3 different campuses, but we were working with the CARICOM HRD strategy at the time, and within that strategy or around that strategy, they actually mapped out what was described as or titled as the ideal Caribbean citizen. So I don't know if either of you have memory of this, but some of the items that were listed, and of course that's incredibly problematic because who determines this ideal Caribbean citizen? How do you enforce it? But it was really to provide a sort of goal to which the HRD strategy would work. So if we are developing the human resources of the region, it's towards what? What is the vision? And among those characteristics listed, they included commitment to education and self-improvement, community engagement, cultural awareness and identity, ethical and responsible behavior, adaptability and productivity. And at the time I was doing a lot of mapping work with credentials and so on and trying to align what we were doing in the education sector to what the HRD was saying was needed to drive the economies. And then also looking at, you know, this concept of what we want to see as our ideal Caribbean citizen emerging from that. So I don't know if, you know, CARICOM has any plans to revisit that. I don't know if the OECS is going to revisit that. But this idea of who we are comes back to that earlier question about our independence as well. And Prof. Robinson, I think you spoke a little bit about this when you looked at survival and sovereignty as well, in terms of the way that you define sovereignty also. And we're particularly interested in that. So we're going to take a break. We're going to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, Prof. Robinson, if you can share with us a little bit about your takeaways as well. It is, you know, again, the theme, one of the themes of the show is really innovation meeting inspiration, and I am already feeling inspired. There is some work that we are doing, a small team of us, in trying to make a contribution, Sybil, to the development of the ecosystem to which you just spoke. So there is an emerging global group which falls under the umbrella of the World Chamber of Entrepreneurs for Economic Development, and we are actively pursuing a St. Kitts and Nevis chapter so that entrepreneurs can be part of the solution collectively. And that is really exciting because we have the opportunity to look at some of those touch points to see where we can also be part of advocating for certain policies, of growing our business through relationships, of making mentorship moments easily available. So our counterpart, Kimia Glasgow in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, she has that already built into her national chapter, where there are mentors that are part of the, or aligned with the membership, so that whenever you have a member who is working through a particular problem, but they maybe don't have access to the guidance that is needed, they have it within the organization. So they can go in and they can say, here's my, lean canvas, here's my pitch, any tips, any thoughts. And that is reassuring. It's helpful and it's necessary in this environment as well, because many of us, now that I'm a full-time entrepreneur myself in a micro business space, you're out here learning on your own. But it's a risk when you're learning on your own, because you also need to earn and you need to, feed families and take care of all of those things. So that is something that, I'm really energized by what you've shared, Sybil, because it gives me, and I'm sure our small team, which includes Telly, Onu, Rodney Brown, Anastasia Elliott, and Brandon Cranston, all people who are well known to the entrepreneurial landscape in St. Kitts and Nevis. And for those who are listening, we are recruiting members. Please come and join us on this movement. But when we come back from this next break, we're going to hear from you, Prof. Robinson, because I actually, I think I'm a little bit nerdy because I sat down Sybil to it, because when I saw on LinkedIn on a Saturday, I think it was a Saturday after the GRD, I saw what you had published there already, and I sat down and I took my note. I was going through my notebook today, and I was like, I don't really have to do much to prepare for tomorrow because I have all these notes already what Prof. Robinson wrote, because I was like, because this is what I think is very important about what you both do. I will say now, from the practitioner end, it helps me. I love a good strategy. When I worked at the UWI, I loved a good strategy. Now, when you're on your own, it's hard to write your own strategies. Sometimes the national strategies, to be quite honest, are a bit misaligned. But I'm seeing hope in the strategies and in the writings that you all are putting out, because I can now look at that and say, okay, I can pin my work to this. Okay, Prof. Robinson has given me some ideas here. Okay, Sybil has given, along with the ECCB, I've coordinated a dialogue through which I can learn and I can do better, and we can connect and we can build better. So you all are doing amazing work that is beneficial to those of us in the sector who are practitioners. So we're going to pause for a break. We're going to hear from our wonderful sponsors. And when we come back, Prof. Robinson, we're going to hear from you on the GRD and your key takeaways. Stay tuned.
WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is Win FM.
Get ready, St. Kitts and Nevis. The biggest outdoor savings event of the season is coming your way. Join TDC Home and Building Depot on Saturday, May the 30th for the spectacular outdoor tent sale. Save big with up to 75% off selected items. Furniture, appliances, home goods, hardware, electronics, lawn and garden supplies, and so much more. Whether you're upgrading your home, tackling a project, or shopping for unbeatable bargains, this is the sale you don't want to miss. 1 day only, Saturday, May the 30th, TDC Home and Building Depot, St. Kitts and Nevis. Come early for the best deals, because once they're gone, they're gone. TDC Home and Building Depot, serving St. Kitts and Nevis.
Welcome back. You are tuned in to Creative Voices. We have in studio, virtual studio with us today, Mrs. Sybil Welsh of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and Professor Justin Robinson of the UWI Five Islands campus. I am your host, Sarah Owen. We have been generating ideas, sharing information, talking about all that we've learned through the ECCB's recent growth and resilience dialogue and what is mapped out for us in the Big Push strategy, which the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank recently launched, and how each of us are able to play a role in really pushing this agenda forward in terms of what we want to see for our region. And Prof. Robinson has advised us that no one is coming to save us. So we're going over to you, Prof. If you can just share with us some of your takeaways from GRD, some of what you envision in terms of how we can collectively be part of this push.
Okay, so thanks again. So I think a key innovation of the Big Push is to actually have a central bank be promoting the idea of growth. You know, and because usually central banks are supposed to be the Grinch. You know, they're telling you what to cut and talking about austerity. So I was certainly blown away by the innovativeness of the governor and his team, where the central bank is really not the surgeon telling you, well, you have to cut this and you have to hold. How can we actually double the size of the economy? And I think a central bank, and with the institutional credibility of ECCB, taking that lead, I see that as really, truly innovative. I think another aspect of the innovation and one of my key takeaways is that the entire workshop is structured to come up with some action items. You know, in Barbados, they like to speak of this Caribbean disease that they call IDD, you know, implementation deficit disorder. You know, that you have all of these wonderful plans and things don't get implemented. You know, we are good at talking, etc., but not doing. And the entire structure of the whole setup at the workshop conference is that you don't just talk, you don't just put in that, you actually come out, there's a strategy, and then there are tactics and action items. What I tried to contribute was to push the Big Push to think about something. You can grow the economy. I think in the OECS, we've had consistent growth outside of external shocks. But who are you growing it for? And really that, in many ways, was the contribution of my 5-part op-ed. Because, you know, I always get, one of the dangers of being a public intellectual is that you have to take all the cursing, you know. So people are always saying, but Justin, I hear you guys talking about the economy growing, but I don't feel it. You know, it's not visible to the man on the street. So in the op-ed, I really try to focus a lot and try to get the Big Push to think. We don't just want to grow the economy, but what about young males?
I was just going to ask about that because I know that's a big part of your Big Push.
Yeah, so you know, that's a huge issue. Now, we're not doing as well as we think educationally. Only a relatively small percentage of our school leavers actually qualify for tertiary education. But even among that small group, across our UE campuses, females are about 70% of our enrollment. We, across the OECS, you know, we have this homicide crisis. So what about opportunities for young males? So one of the op-eds focused about, can we make sport a business? So, you know, so these young men who everybody thinks is on focus, they don't seem to have a purpose in life, but, you know, you go around the Caribbean, they're practicing and playing their football, their basketball, they're pumping up in the gym, etc. They find a lot of discipline for these physical activities. And in a way, we treat sport, as they say in Barbados, and not really as a business and as a way that we can really engage some other players in our economy. And in a way, create some new avenue. In a sense, where is the growth going to come from? Are we going to do more of the same, or do we actually, if we're going to double from 3, if we're going to move from 3 to 6 to 7, we have to find some new engines. You know, just pumping up what we have is probably not going to get us there. So how do we build out the sport industry, the creatives as a business? Again, is another avenue, not just for the young men, but also for the females. A lot of that, we are the carnival in some ways, creative capital of the world in some aspects. But again, it's a pastime. People can barely make a living from it. But these are big businesses in other parts of the world, and also emphasizing the renewable energy as again another economic pillar. That seems to be one of the areas where we have some capacity. We have sunshine all year round. Some places can do geothermal and so on. So what I really wanted to try to inject into the big push was, one, the sense of urgency in the new moment. We have to do this. We have to do it for ourselves. But the growth numbers we want are not really going to come, I think, from just the same thing. We need some new drivers. We need some diversification, if you want to use that word, but also to grow in a way that we are bringing in some of the people who get left behind. So if you take a simple example of Caribbean reality, so the government in Barbados and ECU, you might proudly go and announce there's this new hotel project. Great, but a lot of people in Barbados are going to yawn. Because why? Because they understand, without anybody telling them, that 95% of the jobs are really $1,200 a month jobs. And the reality is that a generation ago, that may have been a life-changing job. Now a person has to think of, do I really want to take that job? Because I have to find clothes to go to work. I have to find care for my child. It's no longer a life-changing job. They can't aspire with that. They probably can't go and get a car loan, a mortgage, and so on. So we have to find some new avenues to grow the economy if we're going to get the number. But also, I think more importantly, if we're going to include a set of persons in the growth who have not traditionally been included. And I don't know if I succeeded in getting that perspective into the thinking, but that was really my objective. Because I think they already have a fantastic setup with the big push to drive action. I just really wanted to, if we try to grow by more of the same, we will not get the growth number. Or even if we get it, it will not satisfy a big chunk of our population.
Yeah, I think what happens very often is that we identify the what, but then the how, or the what next, is really where it becomes a little bit problematic. I remember on our very first episode, we had an actor and a filmmaker, local filmmaker Cleon John, and actor Michael Cherry, who had just been in the Netflix movie Shirley on the Barbadian American who made a run for the Democratic seat for the U.S. presidential race in the 60s. So it's a really phenomenal movie. But when we were discussing, items around culture and identity and so on, which a lot of this really comes back to, because I think when I listen to you, I have so many memories still in 2026 of, even scholarship opportunities that have been made available through sport, and parents who have said, no, after the person has qualified, because they have competed to qualify, but then they don't go, and you inquire as to why they haven't gone, and it was that the parent wanted them to stay home and to work or to find another field, or and the same thing we see in dance, in a lot of those. So some cultural shifts still, I think, need to occur. And there was, during the time of the change in the coat of arms in Trinidad and Tobago, there was a lot of public discourse, and Marlon Dabo said, posted that, and I'm quoting here, culture doesn't only consist of things that are entertaining, but also consists of values that characterize us as a nation. Further saying, I am referring to fostering values like integrity, responsibility, accountability, humility, respect, thoughtfulness, empathy, openness to learning, and the adherence to proper process. These are the cultural pillars that will elevate us, transforming our pride in who we are from simply celebratory to genuinely aspirational, which I think goes back to your question, Prof, of where is the growth going to come from and for whom, for whom is this growth going to be beneficial, And I think that is a big part of what we have to keep coming back to. I remember Sybil last year during GRD, you'll have to remind me of the theme of last year's GRD, but
In the pursuit of excellence.
the pursuit of excellence. So I remember there was a presentation on sort of eventifying the tourism product, and this was last year or year before last year, and the
That was last year.
a commodification of our cultural experiences and that type of thing. And that to me, those are some of the conversations I think that are very important that need to continue on from last year's GRD, because when we look and they're very relevant to what you just shared, Prof, because I understand where the presenter is coming from, but I also think that we have to be very careful when we are looking at creating commodity for every cultural experience, because not everything, in my opinion, needs to be commodified, right? So that's one, that's all part of the dialogue that I think helps us to determine whether we really push the needle forward in these industries. We also had the Olympian from Dominica who was fantastic, but she was sharing, just as you shared, Sybil, about the athlete who will have all of these different touch points and people who will develop the athlete and so on. And she spoke to all of this support and all of this help that she had. And then she also said that in giving back, when she went back to Dominica, that she was providing shoes to the athletes in Dominica. And to me, there was a huge, obvious, glaring evidence presented there of this woman has been incredibly successful. She has a wonderful team that has helped her to be successful, to hone that absolutely marvelous talent with which she's blessed. But you can't have the same expectation of the people who are in the place where they don't have shoes to run, so it's very, so there are those difficult and uncomfortable conversations that I think emerge from the GRD, but sometimes we are a little nervous to go there, so we don't continue that part of the dialogue afterwards. But I did see coming out of GRD 10 that there was a lot of uncomfortable conversation that was continuing. So it gives me courage to say that the moment is upon us when we may be able to grapple with some of these realities, because the child who is, and I find it is so awe-inspiring that we have Caribbean athletes from islands where they run on dirt tracks that compete against and win races against people who have state-of-the-art tracks, state-of-the-art starting blocks, all of those things. We have swimmers who compete in pools, Olympic pools that have starting blocks that's not the right word, but they have to dive and then they have to turn in a pool, but they train in the sea. So, there's a lot there are a lot of easy, I would say maybe low-hanging fruit, because we know what needs to be done here, We know what needs to be done for some of these things, but it's just to kind of mobilize now and actually do it. So if you can imagine, we're actually in the second hour of our program already. So, Sybil, when we come back, I know time flies when you're having fun. So... And I would say that time flies even faster when you're making contribution. So, and that I think is what we're doing here today. So we're going to take a brief pause to hear from our second hour sponsors. So we are blessed at the Voices series to have with us the Horsfords group. So try Horsfords first. Horsfords is sponsoring this second hour, so you can go and get something nice and tasty at Value Mart when the show is finished and, tantalize your taste buds. Or you can go and get some lumber and start building your DIY project over the weekend and all the other wonderful things that Horsfords has in store for you. So try Horsfords first, listeners. And Bougainvillea Books and Gifts is also a sponsor in the second hour. So this is a wonderful home of Caribbean creativity right here in St. Kitts and Nevis, located at Shadwell Great House, where we build community around Caribbean creativity. So stay tuned. I'm your host, Sarah. We are chatting today with Prof. Robinson and Miss Sybil Welsh, and we are learning a lot about how we can become actively engaged in pushing this region forward and saving ourselves. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
Come, build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers. We don't just sell materials, we help you build your dreams. Whether it's a new home, a renovation, or a DIY project, we're here to make it happen. That's why we say, build with us. From foundation to finish, come to our stores where we have the best in building materials, hardware, tools, paints, expert advice, and more. Whatever you need, you can count on us. So if you're ready to get started, build with us. With Hostels Building and Nevis Centers, you're not just building a structure, you're building a future. Let us help you create something amazing. Dream with us, plan with us, grow with us, build with us. Come build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers today. Build with us at Hostels.
Welcome to Bougainvillea Books and Gifts, where every visit is a journey through time and imagination. Step into a world of literary wonders at our boutique bookstore, where every book tells a story and every corner holds a treasure waiting to be discovered. Immerse yourself in the enchanting aromas of our scented candles, perfect for creating a cozy atmosphere in any space. Explore our exquisite handcrafted jewelry, whether you're searching for the perfect gift for that special someone or simply indulging in a little self-care. Bougainvillea Books and Gifts has something for everyone.
It's in the feeling in how we talk. It's in the meaning in our spot. It is the thing that sets us apart. Who we are. 'Cause the rhythm of life keeps bumping. Together going strong. No matter what, we keep things flowing. Before we will go all in. Our hands up in the sky. Celebrating. Come let your rhythm flow.
Good morning. Welcome back to episode 23 of Creative Voices. I'm your host, Sarah. I have the pleasure of chatting this morning with Professor Justin Robinson, Principal and Pro-Vice Chancellor of the UWI Five Islands campus, and Ms. Sybil Welsh, who is a project specialist, among many other things, at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. So we've been speaking about the Growth and Resilience Dialogue. We've been speaking a bit about the ECCB's strategy that has been dubbed the Big Push. So we are pushing big and saving ourselves. And as we do that, just to kind of step back a little bit now, and Sybil, if you can share with our listeners a little bit about the 7 strategic theaters for transformation that are included in the ECCB. And hopefully as we listen, we can also hear where we can place ourselves within this strategy, which, and unless it's been taken down, it is readily available online. I found it there. So you can find it on the bank's website, correct, Sybil?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. So can you share with us what those seven strategic theaters of transformation are?
So the 7 theaters of transformation, which was endorsed by our Monetary Council, and as the audience may know, that at the head of our central bank, the ministers of finance for each of our 8 member countries. And to remind those audience who those countries are, I have a good way of remembering it. I say to begin with A, so that's Anguilla and Antigua and Barbuda. And then I say do good money, because the EC dollar has been, we are hitting now our 50th anniversary of the peg of having our EC dollar linked to the US dollar at 2.7 fixed to 2.7. This took place on the 7th of July in 1976. And so now we're hitting year 50 with this. So I say do good money. That's the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat. And then you see my creative way of making sure I understand that. And then 3 states. So St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so those are our 8 countries under which we have a common currency, the common central bank, the common EC dollar and the central bank. Now, our 7 theaters of transformation tap at our critical areas. So we are looking at food and nutrition security. You know, the region, CARICOM, had this, we have to become food independent by 2025. We have now scaled that up, I think, to 2030, 2035. But that is important. And with all of the geopolitical shifts and the issue of our price of oil going higher and higher with wars and all of these shifts, we understand why it is so critical to feed ourselves. And that goes back to Professor Justin's talk about when we're growing the economy, who are we growing it for? Because 90% of our food or more is imported. So all the hotels that building up, we are actually security, energy security is important, and energy security is important, and we know how that is so important. We have a project going on right now with the World Bank to ensure that we can tap into our natural energy resources. I'll speak about that later. And then there's the issue of connectivity and logistics trade. How do we ensure that we are connected as a region and connected in a way that gives us several pathways to diversified strategic partners? And then, of course, you have to have the knowledge and you have to have the wealth creation. And that is the financial deepening, the financial inclusion, the access, the information, the capacity to create wealth, the access to good paying jobs as well. And then you have the human capital development, that's the skill sets, digital transformation, and tourism 2.0, as Governor says, we have to move from volume to value. So those are the 7 theaters of transformation.
Okay, so we've heard it now, folks. Just to recap, we have the food and nutrition security, energy security, connectivity and logistics, financial deepening and wealth creation, human capital development, digital transformation, and tourism 2.0. So tourism reimagined, using my word here, and looking at going from volume to value. So I don't think that there's anybody listening that can't find themselves somewhere nested within those 7 theaters. And I do like this concept of theaters. I have to say that it's, well, I studied theater, but I hadn't heard it used in this context before. So I quite like that as well. And what came to mind also when I was preparing for this program is this concept that I came upon when reading a book called Ikigai recently. You may have read it, Sybil. I know you read a lot, so this may be familiar to you. But it is a theorist whose name I'm not recalling at present, but he spoke about this concept of anti-fragility. So moving beyond resilience, where, we are very good at withstanding shocks, as Prof. Robinson spoke about earlier. So, we'll get a shock and then we will, but you also, Sybil, mentioned and made reference to Governor Antoine's point about maintenance. So we're good at resilience and we bounce back, but we bounce back to maintain where we were. And this concept of anti-fragility is absorbing the shock and becoming stronger by it. So you don't just bounce back and keep moving. You actually grow and learn from the shocks that you've experienced. And I think that the Caribbean as a region, we've experienced historically many shocks, many shocks that the historians will tell you about, many shocks that the economists will tell you about, many shocks that the environmentalists will tell you about, the disaster preparedness individuals will tell you about. And we are very resilient. And that's something as a Caribbean woman that I'm very proud of. But I like this concept of anti-fragility, so that it's like the opposite of being fragile. So you're fragile and you break, but you're anti-fragile when you actually grow, when you experience shock. So in terms of the role of regional universities, research centers, civil society, and so on, play in shaping and critiquing this big push. Prof. Robinson, you shared a bit with us about your own personal, as a public intellectual, your personal work so far. But in terms of, for example, at the Five Islands campus at the UWI, I imagine there's a lot of alignment of your work and the programming and so on as it relates to becoming anti-fragile as a region. So can you share a bit with us about how you see that working out in terms of how our different centers of importance can take this strategy? I mean, the ECCB is not responsible for implementing all of these elements of what will drive this growth. That's really our work. So what do you envision, or what have you seen that you can put in practice, for example, within the strategic planning period?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. So let me start first with UWI, because that is precisely what was behind UWI's thinking in having the UWI Five Islands campus. Because I often get a question, is Five Islands competing, say, with global campuses already there and so on? But the main purpose of Five Islands is that by having a landed campus in the OECS, you have a community of academics, a community of scholars on the ground, full-time academics, whose research focus, whose public advocacy focus is now going to be on the OECS. Because, even though you have your interest, the place you are in grabs your attention. So even though our scholars are internationally and regionally focused, if you go to Mona campus, again, you are in Jamaica. The research is going to be Jamaica up front, Trinidad, Barbados, and so on. So the Five Islands campus was designed to play that role, and my being at the ECCB for the big push and other areas is where we are sort of offering ourselves or making ourselves available as a critical
Prof?
spoke.
Sorry, we have a call and I don't want to lose the caller. So we'll just take this call and then we'll come right back. Caller, you're live on Creative Voices. Welcome. I'm hearing some beeps, so I suspect we have lost the caller. But if they call back, Prof, I'll just interject again. So
no, that's
yes,
fine.
Continue.
So, and just 2 days ago, UE Five Islands, we had a meeting with the OECS ministers of the environment as they are seeking to access global finance, deal with the climate change issue. So again, we were able to position ourselves as helping them fighting in terms of designing policy briefs, engaging with funders that we engage with, but also because sometimes the disconnect is very easy to have, that being in that room is saying, but you need to frame this within the context of the big push, and I see one of our key roles really is that the big push doesn't just become something that the ECCB is doing, which I think kind of unfortunately it is in some ways right now, but it becomes part of the central organizing principle for public policy and strategy across the EC, so that as a campus, as we are looking at our curriculum, we are setting our research agenda for our staff, our short courses that we are plugging into that, and also advocating, and not just beyond us, so the ministries of education. I'm still intrigued that we have elections, people put forward manifestos in the OECS, and it's like they never heard of the big push and they are all in there. So I certainly see that we need to build an ecosystem where the big push becomes part of the central organizing principle, because you need a strategy. You can't be all over the place. And I think the institutions and the civil society has a key role to play, because in a sense, politicians come and go. They have their own incentives as well, which may not necessarily line up with some of the longevity, long-term strategic outlook of something like the big push. But the institutions remain. So we have to get this down now to the level of our cultural practitioners? How do they see themselves? How do they organize the churches, where people are at? That this now becomes something that is not just a Sybil and ECCB and Governor Antoine and them thing, and they get together once a year in the fancy ECCB and they dress up nice, and it seems all up there. Is now to have the OECS own it. And I think that there are many voices needed along that path.
Yeah, I like go ahead, Sybil, sorry.
Yes, I really appreciate what Professor Justin has said, because when we conceived the construct of the Big Push, which was never for ECCB on its own, but it's really for all of us, whether we are citizenry, whether we are in, and my light has an automatic, if I don't move, so sometimes you might see me moving in the chair, is to keep the lights on. This is part of our cost saving. If nobody's in the room, then the lights go off. But that's efficiency. But getting back to the topic is that it was never meant for ECCB to be the owner of the Big Push. ECCB has a catalytical and leadership role. But what it is for every citizenry, every public and private sector, every youth and other NGO organizations, to say to themselves, how can I become part of that catalytical force to be able to drive socioeconomic development? Because Justin asked the question, development for who? Well, if you're talking about inclusion and financial wealth creation, empowerment, then it's for who it is, has to be the citizenry. So when you look at the components of GDP and you see consumption, investment, government spending, and then you're seeing that the net of exports minus imports, so that you're looking to see what is the differential in terms of our productivity, what do we keep inside the region to help to build it. Then you then go to the architecture and you say we're underperforming, let us say, in sports, in the creative arts, in agriculture, in fisheries, in education, infrastructure. So then you then say, these are the sectors that we have to accelerate our investments, our nurturing, our capacity building, our focus. These are the areas. And so everyone has a part. Can I mentor someone? Justin spoke about the young men who seem to be left behind. Can I mentor someone? Businesses. Can we mentor a business? One of the things we did at the ECCB was mentor those poets, was mentor the youth parliamentarians. And we're looking for a model to carry that and expand that. So how can I fit into there when I am a policy architecture? How does my policy expand the Big Push? When I am in church, how do I encourage my membership to grow, to learn more, wherever I am? And so it's that issue of what new systems we need to drive, because the old systems that go in a linear fashion don't work. And that is where creative thinking, lateral thinking, system thinking, design thinking, when you move from purpose to process to resources to KPIs, so you have your accountability matrix. That is how you get to your vision and your goal. And I think that is what we need.
Right. And you actually just reminded me of another guest that we've had on the show before, Brandon Powell from Nevis, who is a very creative, dynamic thinker, very systems. I mean, that's essentially what he does. His company is Bug Hunt. And as he described it to me, is that, if you have a bug, they will hunt it and they will find a solution and they will fix it. But he told a story of being a child in Nevis and going to primary school, and his friends had their gaming systems. I suppose they were talking about video games and so on. And he didn't have one. And he said he went to the, I guess, garbage dump area, and he says he knows you're not supposed to do it, but he took components that are required to build a gaming system, and he built his own system so that he could then play this game just like his friends. And I mean, he's genius in my humble opinion. And listening to him and listening to his story and listening to his capabilities, there are a lot of people in the rooms in the Caribbean. Well, they're in our ecosystem, but maybe they're not in the rooms. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But they can really apply a lot of this ability and capability. And I know he's doing some very good work with Rodney Brown on networking within that tech space and so on. So I think that there are a lot of doers within our ecosystem that can really help to, and you said something, Sybil, because I'm going to say help to turn on the lights, because, you know, we started off where I was remembering this one of the many very profound things that Governor Antoine said, which was, you know, reminding us that we can either curse the darkness or light a candle, and that the big push is our fire, and thinking about how that reminded me of the UWI's Orient's Ex Occidente Lux, a light rising from the west, which I don't know, Sybil, as an alum, if you picked up in my little piece at the CDT show, where I made reference to light rising in the west. It's just a careful little nod that was placed within there, because I love that concept of it. But you mentioned that if nobody's in the room, the lights go off. In a very practical sense, you're speaking about what's happening in your office, because the light may be going off in your office. However, in a more profound sense, I think that for us, if after all of the dust settles on GRDs and on, you know, these conferences that we have and so on, and then nobody's left in the room, the lights go off until we come back, and no development actually happens and no growth actually happens. So I like very much how you framed that, though I know it was not your intention. You have given us a moment.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that.
That's another moment of poetry. If nobody's in the room, the lights go off. And that is very true. So we're going to take a pause to hear from our sponsors once again. And when we come back, I'm just going to ask for your thoughts, really, looking, Prof. Robinson, at your description of the big push, not just as a development plan, but as a survival and sovereignty strategy. But you've also indicated that the Caribbean must decide whether to be rule setters or rule takers. So I think that this is really interesting to unpack, you know, both this concept of sovereignty and the extent to what does that exactly mean in terms of being the rule setter or the rule taker. And Sybil, also hearing from you on, you know, how the bank's resilience agenda may position us or envision us as rule setters. So we're going to take a break, and we'll come back after the break. The conversation is great. It's going to continue. Stick and stay, as they say, folks. Don't go too far. We'll be right back with Creative Voices.
WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is Win FM.
Come, build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers. We don't just sell materials, we help you build your dreams. Whether it's a new home, a renovation, or a DIY project, we're here to make it happen. That's why we say, build with us. From foundation to finish, come to our stores where we have the best in building materials, hardware, tools, paints, expert advice, and more. Whatever you need, you can count on us. So if you're ready to get started, build with us. With Hostels Building and Nevis Centers, you're not just building a structure, you're building a future. Let us help you create something amazing. Dream with us, plan with us, grow with us, build with us. Come build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers today. Build with us at Hostels.
It's in the feeling in our we talk. It's in the meaning in our spot. It is the thing that sets us apart. Who we are. Cause the rhythm of life keeps bumping. Together going strong. No matter what, we keep things flowing. Before we will go all in. Our hands up in the sky. Celebrating. Come let your rhythm flow.
We're resending the document that was sent earlier. That's all it's saying. Huh?
All right, welcome back to Creative Voices. I'm your host, Sarah Owen. We are back in studio. We have with us, joining remotely, Mrs. Sybil Welsh, Senior Project Specialist at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We also have Professor Justin Robinson, Principal and Pro Vice Chancellor of the UWI Five Islands campus. So we're welcoming them both back to the conversation as we look at how we can collectively work towards pushing this region forward, this sub-region forward. Now the ECU, of course, exists within the wider Caribbean, so anything that we're doing within our currency union, I believe, redounds to the benefit of the entire region. As I shared before we went to break, that when we came back, we would have a little kind of dive into some of the components of your recent op-eds, Prof. Robinson, where you shared that the big push is not just a development plan, but a survival and sovereignty strategy. You also indicated that the Caribbean has to decide whether to be rule setters or rule takers. Can you expand on this a little bit for our listeners and for me, so that we can hear a little bit about what exactly you intend by this? How do you define sovereignty here and risk taking within this context?
Yeah. So again, I think the biggest lesson I think of from January 2025, our biggest issue is the threat to our sovereignty. In all of these islands, Independence Day is a big day. Everybody wears the flag. You have the celebrations and so on. But independence, the notion of being sovereign nations, is actually, so many countries claiming that, is actually quite a recent development. Huh? I mean, if you go before 1945, there are very few independent nations in the world, if you want, or sovereign nations in the world. You have most of the world being really owned by Europe, by a range of European nations. So that United Nations Charter, and really the notion that St. Kitts and Nevis has the same vote in a global forum as China. It's almost a legal fiction that St. Kitts and Nevis is somehow on par with China. That is what our modern world is built on. That there's a rules-based system. There was an agreement that borders would not be altered by force. So it sort of became like you just didn't invade other countries. It was no longer a thing. You just didn't do it. It'd be like walking into the conference room of the big push in a sleeveless, a guy coming in a sleeveless shirt and a short pants. You just don't do it. We had a set of norms, a set of rules. I mean, a big event for my generation, for example, and if you compare it to now, when President Bush II and others, when they went into Iraq, they actually felt, even though they were flexing American power, they actually felt the need that they had to get a UN resolution. They had to get Colin Powell. We are now in an environment where these guys are saying, well, a lot of that is foolishness. Might is right. The strong do what they will. The weak suffer what they must. And I mean, a lot of us are remembering that classic Greek quote that we learned in school and seem useless, but now, really, you really can see it. So basic sovereignty, your right to exist. And somebody cleverly, you would say, cleverly figured out that the way to get these Caribbean countries to come to heel is to pressure people with US visas and things like that. You just didn't do things like that. You didn't do a blanket travel ban, or you honored these elements. So our basic sovereignty, our right to exist as countries with some notion of independence is severely under threat. Also, but other parts of the sovereignty, and in a sense, in a different world, you didn't really think about it, but we are doing this meeting on Google Meets, The whole idea of digital sovereignty, this digital world we live in are all a set of United States companies.
Yeah.
If the United States just decides to use that power in a particular way, where does it actually leave us? I mean, we saw that major AI company Anthropic really face the blunt end where in this Iran war, AI tools are being used to identify bombing targets. And traffic is saying, well, you can't use our platform for that. Or we're going to need some conversation. We're going to need some safeguards. Now, if you go to China, it's almost like a surreal experience. People who go there in terms of digital sovereignty, people are not using YouTube. In a sense, China has its own version of all of these things. In the ECCB region, we got the blunt end of the financial sovereignty with the de-risking and the correspondent banking. All of our financial plumbing goes through the United States. So in a lot of ways, we are very vulnerable in a world where that rules-based order is not adhered to. I mean, our whole existence, the digital tools we use, the financial, the travel, etc. No, we kind of took that world for granted because, and in a way, with good reason. We really. I mean, if anybody told me we'll be back here, I'd be like, really, But again, progress is not a straight line. So, a small island states, I don't think we can ever truly be sovereign or independent. We're not asking to go back to the Stone Ages and so on. But it's clear, and I think you use the term, the fragility, not being as fragile. And it's almost that we almost have to find a way to do more things for ourselves, to really reduce that fragility, reduce that vulnerability, so that we're not just good at weathering crises, but we have mechanisms really that we are not as fragile, we are not as vulnerable. So do we need to plug into other types of payment systems so that if that spigot gets turned off, do we need to, they might not be as great, but do we need to sort of encourage the development of some of our own regional platforms that at least we have things that we can use in the event that things are cut off? So, building in that resilience, and it can be from complex to simple. So, one of the op-eds I wrote spoke like, how do we react to a hurricane? Hurricane season starts Monday. It comes every year. When I was going to school, we all learned the nursery rhyme, June too soon, July standby, and so on. But what happens in a hurricane? Do we take hurricane planning seriously? We are sort of watching the warnings, etc. And then everybody decides that we're going to shut down the country 12 hours before the storm. Everybody rushing to get their children at the same time, all kind of traffic jams and so on. Why can't we, on the basis of the tracking and so on, say, okay, coming out from COVID, 48 hours before a serious warning, we move all schools online. We move to remote work and so on. So again, we sort of build more resilience and less fragility. Sovereignty is a broader term. I think in a way, the better term is resilience, less fragility, because we are naturally fragile because of our small size, limited resource base. But how can we sort of reduce that is really my thinking. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, I think, definitely it is really important for us, I think, to sit and grapple with these very concrete examples, because this is where we really transition from the page to the stage, again, to use that, so that they're looking at the stage of life, So this is the stage at which we find ourselves.
Even for example, us as academics, we take so much pride in publishing in these Western journals. We are so attached to the dependence. Is your article any worse because it gets published in a regional outlet? Is the same article is going to still have the same reach? But we are really very plugged into this dependence in a lot of ways. It's built a lot in our whole sense of status and who we are. And I think, if anything, from the last 18 months, we kind of sort of need to rethink and have a little more pride in ourselves, a little more self-belief in who we are and what we can build, not just for pride's sake, but because in a way, when the rubber meets the road, that's what you're probably going to have to depend on. I mean, a lot of kids are dealing with the possibility that they might have to go to UE.
Well, this, I think this is part of how you refer to, that concept of saving ourselves. Saving ourselves has to be developing developing systems and products, indigenous systems and products that allow us to be less fragile, to be stronger. And, as you were sharing just now, it reminded me of when I was a teenager. I had the opportunity to go with my family to visit my aunt and uncle and cousins in Hong Kong. And there was a typhoon. At the time, to be honest, I did not know what a typhoon was. I learned then that it's like a hurricane, right? So we were out there and we were on the Hong Kong mainland and they lived on an island. And then my aunt said, we have to go back now. So we had to cut our day short because there's a typhoon coming. So, and so I was like, what typhoon, mommy? And then they told me, and then I said, well, it was so unusual to me that, for us, when we have tropicals, we know the system of what's tropical storm warning, tropical storm watch, hurricane warning, hurricane watch. But this is a typhoon is coming and we have to take a boat from where we are to get, so they send out whatever alert systems they have. We all, like now tons of people, because the populations are quite large, so tons of people getting on, we shuffle onto this ferry. The sea is quite rough, something happens along the way, an engineer has to fix something, but they have a system for life continued. That's the thing that I found very interesting, is that nothing stopped. So things got, maybe reorganized and restructured, but there was a system for life to keep going, which suggests to me that this is a system that we can also, adopt for certain levels of natural disaster as well, when we look at where we are and how we move. So that's just a memory that came to mind as you and I know that we have so many skilled professionals within the region who can do all of these types of things, we can build.
Even at the forum I was sharing, even when we talk about, being rule setters, not thinkers,
right, yes.
Many of our problems are unique. And I sort of remember being in St. Kitts a couple of years ago, and I was talking to one of my former students who was there, a Barbadian guy, and he said, when people were writing economics textbooks, nobody was thinking of a country the size of St. Kitts and Nevis. So you virtually have to think that through yourself, So, and my own sense is that we are trying to import a lot of solutions.
Yes.
Taking best practices from around the world, and they might be best practices in that context, but what actually works in our context, and also our heavy focus on the Western world. So as I've sort of looked at this young male and the crime crisis, some of the best examples I'm seeing of interventions are coming from places like Brazil, where they have had problems in their favelas and others. And they have come, their civil society has come up with a lot of innovative ways to deal with these issues. But we are not looking there. In a sense, we are looking for solutions from societies in a way that probably don't have these problems.
Yeah, or they have a variation that isn't an exact match, which is an issue that I faced when I was doing my doctorate in leadership too, that we were looking at all of these strategies that were developed, sometimes decades ago for completely different parts of the world that don't necessarily culturally fit how we lead or how we can lead, or maybe even should lead within the Caribbean as well. So I don't know if you can believe it, but we're coming up to the end of the program, and it has really been a wonderful conversation. We are going to take another break to hear from our sponsors, but when we come back, and Sybil, you're one of the architects of this strategy. So continuing on from this part of this discussion, I'd like to hear from you, Sybil, in terms of how you envision within this concept of being rule setters as opposed to rule takers as well. How do you envision the Caribbean's place in the global economy by 2036 if the big push succeeds? And then we'll close out with some words of advice from both of you for our listeners in terms of the contribution that we can make to this success. So we're going to take a pause here from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Thank you for tuning in. You are still tuned in to another exciting episode of Creative Voices.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
It's in the feeling in our we talk. It's in the meaning in our spot. It is the thing that sets us apart. Who we are. Cause the rhythm of life keeps bumping. Together going strong. No matter what, we keep things flowing. Before we will go all in. Our hands up in the sky. Celebrating. Come let your rhythm flow.
Come, build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers. We don't just sell materials, we help you build your dreams. Whether it's a new home, a renovation, or a DIY project, we're here to make it happen. That's why we say, build with us. From foundation to finish, come to our stores where we have the best in building materials, hardware, tools, paints, expert advice, and more. Whatever you need, you can count on us. So if you're ready to get started, build with us. With Hostels Building and Nevis Centers, you're not just building a structure, you're building a future. Let us help you create something amazing. Dream with us, plan with us, grow with us, build with us. Come build with us at Hostels Building and Nevis Centers today. Build with us at Hostels.
Campari, red passion, embrace the mix.
Campari red passion, full action, this is red passion. Embrace the mix, add Campari, make it turn and twist. Add your chaser in your drink. Campari red passion, make the nicest mix. Campari!
Campari red passion, embrace the mix. Must be 18 years or older to drink. Drink responsibly.
Welcome to Bougainvillea Books and Gifts, where every visit is a journey through time and imagination. Step into a world of literary wonders at our boutique bookstore, where every book tells a story and every corner holds a treasure waiting to be discovered. Immerse yourself in the enchanting aromas of our scented candles, perfect for creating a cozy atmosphere in any space. Explore our exquisite handcrafted jewelry, whether you're searching for the perfect gift for that special someone or simply indulging in a little self-care. Bougainvillea Books and Gifts has something for everyone.
To Creative Voices. We are on episode 23 and it has been another exciting episode. Hard to believe that we are almost at the end, and I always have to remember that the news comes right after me and I don't want them to put me in the naughty corner, so we are at that kind of close off end time to our show. So Sybil, how do you envision the Caribbean's place in the global economy by 2036 if the big push succeeds? And what word of advice do you leave with our listeners in terms of the contribution that they can make or we can make to this success?
So thank you. I think what we want to do is restate what the big push really means. Because you hear the big push, what does it really mean? And so what it means really is it asks a question: how can create an environment of sustained high socioeconomic growth and transformation? So it's not just growth, it's transformation. And what Justin made the case is, and this has been the thesis of our former Deputy Prime Minister, Sam Conda, when he says when he went to study, the economic models were not made for small island states. So here is the lateral thinking. We have development institutions. UWI is 175 years plus, counting. What economic models new can be produced by our own to guide our economies? Because we recognize we have to act now. Government has said we have to act now. It is not just a nice thing to do. It's an imperative. Justin said it's a survival imperative. It is. How do we envision the world? And central bank is playing its part. I mean, when you think about it, we have the renewable energy infrastructure facility that we are working with member governments and with the World Bank. We have the partial credit guarantee program. The governor announced that we have touched over 300 million businesses, small businesses, to a tune of over $30 million in guarantees. That is important because it talks about access. It talks about improved loan terms because you get reduce interest rates because of that guarantee that provides a risk buffer. We speak about our generative AI and Python camp. I have to give that plug. 3 years going, we didn't just stay and curse the darkness. We said, listen, our young people need more than learning about hardware and monitors and all of these things. They need future skills to make them business people, to make them able to be on par with the North Americans, the Europeans, the African continent. And here we have third year into the camp. So these are some things that we can do. Now, what are we looking for in terms of the vision? When we get there, how we know we are going to get there? And underscoring this is leadership, accountability, performance metrics to say, are we doing what we need to be doing? And if not, how can we then be agile and shift? So we're looking at more resilient institutions. But I want to start off with strategy. We're looking for a strategy for transformation, not just for incremental growth, not just for notional growth, but for transformation that hits at the heart of our development of our people, our environment, and economic partnership of our people. And that's where we are going into how can we deepen. So I would like to see a capital market, the stock exchange, all of that become a real fillip to engender the creation or the canvassing of capital to fund our infrastructure development through private-public partnerships. Why can't we have an infrastructure bond that develops our ports that we own as opposed to ceding that to someone else? Why can't we have a public-private partnership that allows me as an individual to buy into a bond that has participation to develop our region, our countries, our communities, and still ensure that our biodiversity, our protection of our environment, those are the things we're looking for. We're looking for our young people to be participating in our money and capital market. They must own shares. They must have abilities for wealth creation. We're looking for more young people at the table of decision making. We're looking for greater connections with our citizenry in the diaspora. But I'm going to close right now and say at the end of the day, the big push is our push, not only to survive, but to strive. Not only to thrive, but to strive, to be the best persons that we can be. And at the ECCB, we want to partner with you.
Awesome, awesome. So listeners, you heard that. The ECCB wants to partner with us. So we must remain in touch with the ECCB. So Prof. Robinson, you have, we're actually at midday. So you have a very brief moment to just share any final thoughts with our listeners on how we can become engaged in the ECCB's big push.
Again, no one is coming to save us. The ECCB has given us a vehicle to save ourselves. And I think we should all get on board and make sure this vehicle succeeds, because the destination is something we need. And if we don't do this for ourselves and do it now, the quality of life in the OECS will not be what we are now used to.
Awesome. So listeners, nobody is coming to save us, but we can save ourselves. Let's not curse the darkness. Let us be the light. And let us remember that we have to maintain this work, because if nobody is in the room, the lights go off. Let us stay in the room. Let us keep the light burning. Let us make the light rise in the West. Let us do the work that needs to be done to push this region forward. So we thank you, Professor Robinson. We thank you, Mrs. Welsh, for being with us today. You all have been awesome. I hope this invitation will be received in a positive way when it comes again, because it will come again as we continue to keep the dialogue open and look at maybe, each of the 7 theaters, in their own light. So thank you all very much for tuning in. It's been another wonderful episode of Creative Voices. It has been our honor to share space, time, and be present with you all today. Wishing everybody a wonderful, wonderful Friday and a safe, secure, and enjoyable weekend.
Okay.